Black Eagle Strength Tribe, welcome to another little town hall podcast. We're going to break down some tips and tricks and discuss the new program a little bit because we have revised the program thanks to some awesome feedback from the users. And now things are even doper than they were before. So,
hmm
Adam, one of the coolest things I think about what's going on now is there's the three tiers. Uh,
hmm
how would you like describe the difference between the tiers, or how would you break that down?
Yeah, man. So, first of all, the main program obviously was just designed around the main people we help, right? Which is, obviously people who want to like learn about me and yours methods, right? And just our approach, but also it's designed to, build functional strength, get good hypertrophy out of it and build like muscular size, but also like healing from shoulder and spine issues as well, right? And these are also movements that, especially if someone is like a martial artist, because like we tend to coach a lot of guys with who are involved in jujitsu or another martial arts, or at least have a martial arts background. So I had all of these things in mind, and I created our main program out of that. And then now it's kind of just like we've made revisions based on some feedback a lot of our people were giving us, right? Um, so the thing is that yeah, there's a tiered system, right? Because like some people they just need to focus on the basics, okay? Because some of the movements that I do might seem a little daunting for a person who's like never even picked up a weight before, or maybe like they're just not the most coordinated, right? And that's totally fine because if we have them do just a handful of movements, just focusing on the basics and not anything too complicated, they'll see huge results. And a lot of times, what happens for people who are kind of in that group is they get intimidated by these highly complex movements, and then ultimately they don't get them done, or they do them incorrectly, and ultimately they're discouraged and it doesn't get done, right? So if we just simplify it, right, and that's actually going to help them with consistency, have like a very simple form of progressive overload with it, and then they just get better and better and better. It builds their confidence, of course, builds their body, and builds their coordination. And then once they have really shown that tier one uh, is is uh, is something that like they can easily handle, then we step them up to tier two, right? Which is really our main program, right? Just because it's the average between someone who's like a highly coordinated athlete and someone who's never lifted a day in their life, right? So tier two has like a little bit more advanced moves, but we're actually still focusing on the core basics. Okay, one of the things that you'll notice for anyone listening and anyone who's any client of ours that's on it still is that there's plenty of variation to keep things fun, keep the body guessing, right? But you'll notice that every week you're going to be doing single arm kettlebell swings. That's a good example of a movement that I want people doing almost every week.
Totally.
Simply because single arm kettlebell swings are so beneficial and they translate so well, and they'll build strength in everything else you do, right? They're also just one of the best movements for people who deal with spine issues as well as people who deal with shoulder issues. And it's one of the best movements that really build muscle and strength um, on the bodies, right? So one of the main things I see from people who do those often is that their back becomes wider, the
Totally.
traps, their lats, and like their upper back becomes more muscular. The core strength becomes stronger, right? It's an aspect of anti-rotation, right? Which fortifies the spine, right? The hips become stronger, and that translates athletically and functionally to everything else they do, right? Even their grip becomes stronger, right? And like if neurologically, I mean, you know how it is, like neurologically, if you really reinforce that connection between the mind and like the peripheral nervous system away, the farthest ends of our extended body, this like really ignites the nervous system to be stronger in everything else it does, right? So that's the whole point. Really focusing on like the basics of just kettlebell overhead press, a few variations of that, but we're really mostly sticking to just simply overhead press. Great for the shoulder, builds strength, builds muscle. Even for those who've dealt with shoulder injury, the simple overhead press allows the shoulder to move correctly. Most people can do it very well, and it rebuilds the shoulder, right? And like I said, single arm swings, usually some leg variation, lunge, right? Lunge, maybe squat here and there, but mostly lunge variations that help open up the hips, the knees, the ankles, but also really build good lower body strength. We're not doing legs too much, right? That's kind of my approach. You know how it is, like being a rugby player, like we're already sprinting a lot, you know what I mean? Being active. I'm not trying to like limp around through my day after doing squats all the time, right? Yeah, so I want an effective way that is good for the lower body, builds strength on the lower body without putting someone in a wheelchair for the rest of the week. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Other than that, like we really simplified the warm-ups. The warm-up shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, but also added some just fun steel mace variations. That's very in it's very in the genre of steel mace flow. Kind of a little bit of my own approach to it. But those movements are actually some of the most important movements for rehabilitating shoulder issues and just strengthening the structural integrity of the shoulders, right?
That was one of the which I absolutely loved seeing was all the different variations of steel mace movements just throughout the warm up, and getting the videos of people sending them in to me being like, hey, how does this look like? The first time ever trying this new thing, and it just looks awesome. Like they've got it, the lines figured out. Like it's a laid it out in a nice way that has people just like loving it, it seems, and it's been great for me to watch. So huge fan.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm glad you like that because because man, like that's one of the main things when I first started learning steel mace, it was like, I got my steel mace flow certification, right? And that's one of the main things I noticed is that like all the variations of turning and rotating and extending with the mace, your shoulder is designed to move and be strong and mobile in so many different planes of motion that you pretty much just have to keep it guessing. Totally. You know what I mean? That's what's going to reinforce the shoulder instead of just doing the same thing over and over. And that's why steel mace flow works so well for that. Other than that, man, it's also like different variations of the foundational basics of the steel club, also with the steel mace, but mostly keeping steel mace stuff light and in the warm-ups for like the first 8 weeks. Right. That's actually, I might have already told you about this. So you know the book Hahnemann Power?
Yeah, love that one by Marcus. I can never pronounce his last name properly.
Yeah.
But
I think I have it right here actually. But Marcus Puijas.
Yes. Very interesting guy from the UK.
Yeah, I would like to meet him one day. Great book. But he kind of broke down the progressive overload and like the advancing of the gata. And he said like your first kind of season with the gata should be like a mobility warm-up kind of thing, right? So like a light, maybe 5 kg gata doing two-handed and single hand swings and whatnot. It's more of a warm-up, right? After you really put in like a large volume of reps over a period of time, then you move it to more of like an accessory movement. So it's like a moderate weight, right? And then after really putting in the reps with that, then you can actually progress it to it being a heavy strength movement. But you got to put in those reps, right? So that's how this program is designed, is that the first part of it, the steel mace stuff doesn't really go past like 5 kg, and it's mostly in the warm-ups, right? I actually have added another addition to this updated program is, the chop variations.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I thought that was a fun movement, but also incredible for shoulder and spine health, right? Really, when it comes to like healing the shoulder, especially people with like rotator cuff injuries or really anything involved in the shoulder, is that it's really reconnecting it back with the spine, right? So having these movements like such as a chop or a diagonal movement, we're twisting and turning and strengthening the spine and reconnecting the shoulder blade with the spine and the ribs, right? That's what it is. Just like a swinging an axe or, a tire slam or something like that. That's like kind of like that primal movement. Starting out, those chop variations are actually slow and controlled.
Of course.
right?
Love it.
Slow and controlled. And then like towards the, I think, latter half of the program, we do them explosively. And actually, what's really funny? You know what reminded me of that and had me experimenting with that for the past few months? There was this like 14th century Turkish like czar or something like that. He was like some Turkish royalty. I forgot his name, but he was also like a war general, right? And he was known for being a monstrous man, just absolutely huge. His tool of choice, his weapon of choice, was like a 56 kg mace.
I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm
It
gonna.
was like, yeah, it was like 120 something pound mace was his favorite battle weapon. And I was like, there's no way. That's not possible. There's no freaking way. But that was his tool of choice. And um and what he would do, like, to prepare for battle, like if he knew there was like this big war coming up or a battle coming up, he would start basically just carrying around like a 200-pound kettlebell, right? So like kilograms, what is that? It's like like 92 kilogram.
Around there.
Yeah, yeah, and he'd carry it with him all day. Just throw it over his shoulder. He'll be doing swings with it, and but like the main thing is that it would not be detached from his body all day long.
I
And that's how
love
he prepared.
I love those old, like the old Legends of Strength.
I know.
Like the classic Milo of
Yeah,
carrying around the bull, right? And the slowly getting larger and the progressive overload. And I love all those old stories. And the Great Gamma, of course.
great
Gamma,
guy, of course.
his legends. At this point, though, like I call them legends at this point because he starts to border. I think
Yeah. Oh
it's
yeah, I'm starting to feel like I'm not sure this really happened. I'm
great.
is has there apparently this Turkish whoever the guy is, I need to look him up, but apparently like his mace is like still in a museum somewhere, and I'm like, is it his? And and also he had a like 56 kilogram sword,
Mm,
right? So that's like 120 something pounds, I think.
goodness.
Sword.
Just an adult.
So he has like this. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like just people just get obliterated into dust if you hit it. Like I find that very excessive, right? Because if you're that strong, then like why not just have a regular sword and a mace and then you just destroy people? You know what I mean? Like, but I thought of that and I was like, what on earth? Like I'm like, that's actually incredibly strong. And I started experimenting with like a mace, and of course I'm like, fuck me, man. Like, actually using it, like kind of doing movements that are more just like you were swinging an axe, chopping a tree, or like even just using it in battle. So I started experimenting with these movements, a lot of rotation and stuff like that. And I'm like, fuck me, like 5 kilograms is heavy. You know what I mean? Like doing these
Absolutely.
movements, over and over. Yeah. And I'm just like, how would someone ever do that with a mace? But anyway, I also realized I was like, man, this is such a showing of strength. If you were someone who could do that, oh my gosh, you would destroy someone. Oh, you know what? That also reminds me of. You remember, the movie Troy with
Yeah.
Brad Pitt?
Yes.
Yeah. You remember that dude in battle who had that giant war hammer and he was just slinging it around, just annihilating people?
Yeah.
I always thought as a kid, I was like, well, that's cool, but I feel like that guy would just get worn out in 10 minutes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or just the recovery rate. That's always been the thing with me with maces as like a combat tool. Like,
Yeah.
agreed, 5 kilo would probably be the heaviest I'd want to go. I've done a lot of that, the chopping style motions in the Steel Mace level 2 program. We started to do like a lot of that same kind of movement, and
Yeah.
done a lot with the 5 kilo, and it just cooks you. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine trying to like because swinging it's one thing, right? But then getting
Sure.
it so you can do it again
Yeah.
becomes this totally different element when it's anything heavier than 5 kilo.
It's
So
way different, man. You can get someone who deadlifts 600 pounds and like and they would still struggle with something like that. That's when I realized I was like, man, this is a real rotational movement with the mace is like a real showing of functional strength. And
absolutely.
I bet that if you can do that and start controlled and light, right, then like your spine would be like bulletproof, and your shoulders would be freaking bulletproof and handle anything. So that's why I started incorporating that. And now I can't wait to see like how that affects the clients. I feel like just that would be gnarly, especially if you're a martial artist. If you're doing like rotational and punching, like
any aspect, like we were talking before the podcast about I've picked up golf recently, and how just the rotation aspect of that has been something that's come really naturally to me because of this style of training. So there's the crossover there, throwing a rugby ball, throwing a punch, throwing a baseball.
oh, yeah.
Man, the sports just seem to be built around rotation. So
right. Well, the human body, man, because like I've talked about this before, but the human body is specifically evolved to be rotationally athletic. So if you look at it, when someone sprints, they're rotating, right? If someone, I'm sure you've played rugby with some meatheads, and when they're running, they're like a robot, and their shoulders are square with their hips, and like they're not really, like, the muscle that they build and the strength they build in the gym isn't really translating to a natural athletic motion. Because probably I'd say the sprint and the throw are the two ultimate athletic expressions of the human body. It's because it's what we're evolved to do, right? We're very efficient at running, sprinting, and throwing, right? Which, whether it's like swinging an axe or throwing a punch or throwing a spear, it's something our ancestors have done for millennia, and that's how we've developed, right? It's what brought us into the Stone Age, is our ability to use tools and hunt with them and make things, right? And so it's all rotation, right? So if you can get someone to like sprint faster and more fluidly, if you can get someone to throw faster and more fluidly, then you have increased their mechanics with like everything else that they can do.
That's cool.
So that's the whole idea.
Cool concept. I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, rotation being a base movement is something I'm a huge fan of. When I first took a personal training certification, they talked about the basic movement patterns, and it was push, pull, squat, hinge. And it wasn't until a few years later that I was talking to somebody about it, and they're like, yeah, I agree with that, but I say push, pull, squat, hinge, and rotate, just because the body is designed for it. And for me, that became a huge game changer in how I programmed just sessions for people, just general fitness sessions, how I worked my own thing. There's always some form of rotation or anti-rotation, just because, like we've talked about, it's just how the body's built. Got to get it in there. And I find so many people that have locked down spines, it's because they don't live a life where they have that rotation anymore. So we can add that in. We're going to do huge things for people, of course. There's always people though that talk that like they get squeamish once they see people moving their spine, right, or rotating.
Yeah.
And I heard I heard it put beautifully once. Can't remember who said it, but I saw somebody say that if the spine was meant to be totally straight all the time, it would be built like a femur. But based on the fact that it moves, we should move it. And I totally agree.
That's actually so that's why for anyone who doesn't know how to program looks, it's it's a 4 days a week of workouts, right? 4 workouts. All right, 2 of them are kettlebell based, and the other 2 are rotational tool based. Steel Mace, Steel Club, right? Push-ups thrown in there, right? But the whole point of those rotational days is to mobilize the spine and to twist and to turn and to flex and extend with these motions. And what that does, that actually does wonders for people who come through our program with like herniated discs, right? And spinal issues, because what that does is it decompresses the spine, right? So the musculature around it relaxes, but it also strengthens it, right? One of the main things you can get someone who can deadlift 600 pounds, but if they like have to catch something in a quick rotation, they hurt their back, right? So really the main limiting factor of anyone who if you want to see how strong your spine is, see how well you're able to rotate and resist rotation.
Totally.
Right. I've had people tell me, they're like, yeah, I'm pretty strong, but like, like I caught my dog jumping out of my truck the other day, and then like I tweaked my back. You know what I mean? And so rotation ultimately is what we're limited by. And if you can get someone to strongly rotate or resist rotation, their spine will be impenetrable. And able to move in a full range of motion. That's the whole idea of like the rotational aspect of what we do on this program.
Gotta love that, man. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've definitely seen and read and received just all sorts of positive feedback on that, on people being like, yeah, I feel like I can just move so much better now. I feel like my back is feeling way better than it has before. Some movements that were too, like I was too tight on in the at the beginning of the program, I can do easily now. Like I've gotten so many messages like that, and it's just been absolutely awesome to see. Absolutely
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, man. It's yeah. Once again, like a lot of people think you need to traction the spine, right? And like so, like in modern PT, yes, like they'll freaking try to rip you apart. They'll tie something like to your hips and then to your shoulders, and you know what I mean. Um, when actually the right way to traction the spine is just to move it naturally. That's from twisting and turning and whatnot. That releases the tension of the spine. That's the whole idea. So yeah, man, I'm glad everyone's been really loving that. So
Yeah, it's been awesome. Been absolutely awesome. And hey, so then on back, kind of kick back a little bit here to the three different systems. We have like the phase one, as we're calling it, which is this is our, we're going to give you the real base movements. We're going to get those programmed in so that we can upgrade you to the phase two, which is the main program. This is what the vast majority of people are on right now. And again, some basics, but some more advanced basics. And I've noticed also the deeper they get, the more complexes they see, the more flows they see, the more things we see starting to connect, which is always cool as well. And I love that aspect of movement, as you know. And then so the phase three then is like the advanced phase, right? Like that's like someone's crushed the main program, they've powered their way through it. Now they're on to phase three. What does phase three look like in comparison?
still working on it. It's a work in progress, but I'm thinking about all the ways that the person who is at this level has advanced, right? So obviously they've gotten stronger, right? This is definitely for someone who like resolved any issues as far as if they had dealt with shoulder or spine issues. Like at this point, should be like pretty dang healed, right? Um, a heavier mace for sure, as well as a heavier steel club for sure. Typically, what I do when I go for the heavier rotational tools is when I go heavier, I simplify the movement, right? Typically, I mean, because how I do. Like, I love like the big, heavy mace, heavy club stuff. I'm really doing like strength building exercises. Like really no more than 20 reps at a time, right? Which is like kind of how the program is designed. Um, but yeah, I simplify the heavier I go. And when it comes to like the steel mace, I really just work on 360s or 10 and 2s,
Totally.
right? I might do like, some mace curls, or actually the other day I did like kind of overhead press,
Yeah.
right? Before I really got into like 10 sets of 360s, just to give good balance, right? So I think like I'm going to add, um, for a steel club and a steel mace days, I think I'm going to like simplify those, and I typically like to do like I approach those not only as like a healing tool but also like a bodybuilding tool. So I'll do some sort of like, if I have like a heavyish club, I'll just do like some pump press, just overhead press to get the delts, right, get blood flowing to warm up the triceps, right. Typically some curls, right, and I'll do that before I'll go into like a large volume of sets with like a rotational movement, gamma cast, or even just any sort of cast, or just a complex or something like that. So it increases hypertrophy, it increases blood flow during the main movement. It's a great warm up, and overall, it's like a more holistic way of bodybuilding while also doing the body good and building functional strength. It's kind of like my approach with that. So yeah, I see on this phase three, it would be like simpler movements, but a bit heavier, but also, we'll still see if we can like, they'll also have like some medium weight stuff.
Definitely.
In fact, yeah, I'd like the chops. I want to like really advance with the chops. And like, that's something you would do with like a lighter mace, of course.
Absolutely.
Right. And I really, maybe kettlebell complexes, right? I like approaching the like heavy kettlebell work that way, but at the same time, I don't want to veer too far from just the basics. I'm not trying to get all wacky and crazy,
Totally.
right? Because the basics will do you the most good, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. A lot of people, they look for like novelty and like crazy kettlebell flows and stuff like that. When in reality, like what builds real strength is just, um, for the most part, focusing on the fundamental movements,
Definitely.
right? But on top of that, I'm thinking about what is the closest way to how I train,
Mhm.
right? Sprints. You know what I mean? Yeah, from rugby, dude. Like, that's a huge part of what's built my body. I know it is for you. Sprinting is like probably like the most elite movement for the human body, right? If you can get someone to sprint well and sprint explosively, like that is a healthy athletic body, you know? And it does so well for the body too. It boosts testosterone, right? Um, it's anaerobic conditioning, so it gets the heart rate up, and but at the same time it builds muscle. It's just the ultimate movement. And I do sprints at least once, if not twice a week, playing rugby.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's so important, right? So if I think phase three. The thing is, like most people aren't able to do sprints in like modern day humans because like their body's so atrophied. They'll pull a hamstring, they'll pull a hip flexor, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Um, but like by the time they get into phase three on this program, their body should be built up and biomechanically sound that we can start incorporating sprints.
I love that.
Um, yeah, so I'm trying to find a way of incorporating that without having people do too much. I'm not trying to make people like do all this stuff, you know. Um, I think a good workout is you get in, you get out in an hour,
Totally.
right? So I'm big on simplicity, but at the same time, like advancing in simplicity. Um, and yeah, man, yeah, I'm thinking about like adding like a recorded Persian yoga session like every Wednesday for recovery. Right, this is something that they can do with like a steel mace. You don't have to have like two meal with it. Um, and then maybe like some like steel mace flow on the other like off days and stuff like that.
Love it, man.
Uh, yeah, just to give really good value. So that's what I think phase three might look like.
I think that's awesome. It sounds great, man. I'm looking forward to it. One thing, if I were to have feedback, my favorite week that I've seen on like any of the program, like the first program, the revised program, the level one is the week where you have them do a very base complex. It's like 4 single arm swings, 4 cleans, 4 snatches, or something along those lines, and
Mm-hmm.
have them do 10 sets of that and just start at like a comfortable weight and just see if they can get a little heavier each time. And when they feel like they've kind of hit the end, they finish out their sets with that. I love that one. I love that week. I found that it really lets people know what they can actually do, which has been like awesome. For one, and two, I love just that idea of like you were saying, using the comp to get a little bit heavier because you're connecting dots, you're connecting these pieces, and you're getting all this work, but you're only doing like one rep, which is something that I appreciate as well. And yeah, getting into the heavier mace stuff, man, I'm the same way, especially with like I have a very wide array of mace from 2.5 kilos all the way up to 35 kilos. And generally, yeah, those big heavy ones, same idea. There's the occasional leg work with it, the occasional press work with it, but more often than not, I'm swinging that sucker because
Right.
personally, I find that weight, like that's what that mace is going to do best for you. And
Right.
man, we've had a couple people start to get up to those heavier maces, and that's really cool to see as well.
Yeah, totally, totally. That's kind of what I was telling you too, like earlier, like, because I know you like to advance people by like 2 to 4 kilos at a time, and I was like, oh, you're done with a 10 pounder? Let's go for a 25. Like, but that's just me though, because like a lot of it is focused on the 360, um, but I'm noticing that for a lot of people, yeah, you've got to like kind of slow it down a little bit, like, and that's really like gauging them, But especially with the chops, especially with like all the other variations, you can't just lift up a 35 kilo and do much with it except for like 10 and twos. You know what I mean? Unless you've worked your way up. So,
And like
um,
even 10 and twos at a 35 kilo, like that's like there's a dozen people in North America right now that are swinging that kind of weight for. for that kind of repetition.
Right. Yeah. I can do, because I have a 35, that one from White Lion.
Yeah.
Yeah. They gifted me that one. And man, it like, I love it. It kind of collects dust because I have to just like I have to check myself with it just every now and then,
Yes,
and
definitely.
I can do like 4 10 and 2s on that one so far. But I can't wait to start using that regularly.
Totally. Yeah, that's like my right at my top end. I think my absolute best with it was 12, 10, and twos, and it cooked me. Cooked.
Yeah. Yeah. One of these days I want to be one of the first, if not the first, to swing over 100 pounds. Um,
Brad did it. Do you know who Brad is? Brad Maddox? Or
yeah, I follow him.
Brad Hutchinson or Hutchins, something his handles like Brad I don't know. Anyways,
Brad H.
something. So Brad Hendrick or gapping on his name, but Brad. He
Yeah.
a couple of years ago he did the Varanasi style, like the shrimp back slide with over 100 pounds. And then he recently, within like the last year, I want to say, had like two off shoulder with 100 pounds, and then like that was it. But then I believe he had a couple surgeries after that, non-related, and he's working his way back up now.
Yeah, a hip surgery. Yeah, I follow him. Yeah, man, that's impressive. I've been loving seeing this stuff he does. I will say personally, like I see him do traditional goddess style, where he's like basically sliding it up. I
Yeah,
don't think that counts.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Brad, if you're watching this, man, like much love to you. Love what you do, man. But like, I believe the standard is no contact, full 360, come to a hard stop at 12 o'clock.
Mm.
And if you can't, and in fact, I believe like if you can't come to a full 360 and stop for like at least 5 reps, it's too heavy. And that's actually more from like Greg Walsh, Wolf Brigade standard
Totally.
of weight, right? Because just with rotational weights, I mean, you know how it is. It's like you have to control the momentum. We're not just like flippy flopping that weight around. I mean, that would just destroy you. So showing control is the ultimate way to show that you can do that. And yeah, so I'm a big believer in just like the standard 360.
Love it. I've also like I always love a standard as well. My standard that I've always used is anything less than 10 is a happy accident. If you can't do 10 in you can't actually do it yet. So for me, that's 10 and twos. I like the 10 and 2, just because it's what I'm most one is what I'm most comfortable with now, but two, I will straight up get bored with 360s. If because of the volume that I do. So I do just a lot of twos personally, but I love, any kind of standard. I think that's one of the important things. That's another one of the things I like about the program is having standards. So with the mace, again, just as we're on the topic of it, we do have that standard where it's like, hey, if you can't do 54 in the one direction, 54 in the other direction, maybe we don't want to quite look at a new weight yet. I love that. I love that, especially when I tell people that after I teach them the swing, because I get them to do like kind of 5 in each direction, 10 in each direction, and they get the swing, but they're like, oh my gosh, like those 5-10 reps cooked me. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So when you can do over 50 of those, then we'll talk.
Yeah. That's the thing too. For anyone listening, when it comes to rotational tools, you do have to start lighter. We talked about this before because the thing is that they're really going to expose any weak link in your chain, especially from like the hand all the way up the arm to the shoulder to the core, right? For most people, that's like the grip, the wrist, right? And like even like maybe your rotator cuff, right? As well as just like, you have to have your connective tissue and your tendons to be like caught up before you start going heavy, right? So that's why most people are like, how do you strength train with this thing? Because like you get like these bodybuilders who have like a 10-pound weight and they can't control it. You know what I mean? So like you got to like start with that, build your grip, build up your your wrist and your tendons and your just capacity. And then once you really put in like a large volume of reps, 108 reps is our standard, right? 54 one way, 54 the other. That's when you know that you're ready to go a little heavier, right? That's why you have to start out so light and just put in a lot of Yeah. Like you have to get your mobility and your joint capacity on par with the other stronger muscles of your body.
Totally. Totally.
Right.
Absolutely. You're only as strong as your weakest link. We got to catch that weakest link up before we can start trying to build everything else up as well.
Exactly. That's exactly how it is. Yep.
Love it, man. Love it. Absolutely fantastic, man. I like I've already said a couple of times, I love the revised program. I know the people already on it are loving the revised program as well. One of the things I love as well is that you will take that feedback and you do make those improvements and make things better. I've seen a lot of people out there that they put out the program and then it's kind of out there, you know what I mean? And that's the end of that. Yeah. Not here. We're going to fine tune it. We are going to move. We're going to groove. We're going to improve, and we're going to help the people around us improve as well. And that is just, man, I'm just stoked on it. Like I said, everyone that I've talked to seems to be super jazzed. So once again, how awesome. But
Yeah.
cool, man. That is a good little rundown on all of those. I think we can probably close out here in a second, but first let's just throw a couple tips out there for people. So we talked about a lot of rotational tools today, and we talked about some like joint health stuff and the connective tissues and making sure all that's ready. That's kind of what we ended off there with. So let's maybe talk something on that. How about this? Let's throw a tip out there for people new to rotation training, how to make sure or how to take care of tendons and ligaments, whether that be pre-session, in session, post-session. I'll let you think. I have one in the chamber, and that would be to make sure that you are warming up not just wrists, but your feet as well. Get those hands moving. I see a lot of people, they'll move the wrists, but they won't get those fingers, and then their hands start to cramp up, which then leads to all sorts of other issues. So move your fingers, move your wrists, and maybe after the session, take care of the meat in the hand. Give it a little rub, roll a golf.
Oh my gosh. Dude, hand massages. When my fiance rubs my hand, I fall to the ground. I'm like a puddle. It's great. Oh my gosh. Forearms. Yeah. That's the thing, especially starting out. I feel like the first year that I really got into like my first mace and like club work and stuff like that. That first year, I'd say like my forearms are real tight, right? And just like digging into it, I felt like it was just hard as a rock, right? But massage it for sure. Just massage. But now my forearms feel great. Of course, it always feels awesome to massage them because they're being worked so often. But yeah, the main thing is, like stretching and blood flow. You need plenty of blood flow going there before you start really stressing it,
Fantastic. All right, my friend. And to the rest of the Black Eagle Strength Tribe, thank you for listening. Thank you for all the positive feedback that we have received on the program so far, and especially on the revised stuff. It is great to see people moving with it. It is great to see people doing the thing, and it is great to see people just improving the shoulders and the backs and to see it all working. So thank you all for putting work. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Adam, for chatting. Always nice to connect. And we'll do this again soon. I'm going to end the recording here. Thank you all so much. Peace and love.